Hello, we're good to go and very welcome to Lesson 5, and this is part of our Psychological Problems unit, and specifically today we are going to be looking at what are the treatments for depression. So if you are depressed, are there anything you can take? Is there any therapy you can go to in order to perhaps alleviate the situation and alleviate your condition? Before we launch into that, I would just like to point out, please do go on to Show My Homework. There is an attached document there which will take you to a cracking A4 guidance on this piece of work. You need to go to page 178 and 179. I'm just looking at that now, and there will be a key terms for you to copy. I'd like you to do the activities please on this page, and also whilst I'm delivering this narrative, could you please take key notes. Once you have your work written down, take a picture of it, ping an email to your psychology teacher. That would be fantastic. So what are the treatments for depression? Well, there are antidepressants, which are commonly used. In fact, since the 1950s, these have been kind of the gold standard for treating antidepressants. It is perhaps in the 21st century considered not to be the gold standard to use it on its own, but rather with something called CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, which is like a talking therapy, but we race ahead. Let's slow down. So antidepressants are something that the patient can ingest, and it will be a medication, and it will be used specifically to treat the depression. In the ideal world, what we would like is to create a medication or a medicine that actually is almost like synthetic serotonin, because we know if we can boost the levels of serotonin, we can probably enhance mood of a patient. However, we can't do that. But what some antidepressants are very effective at doing, and the one that are most commonly prescribed in the UK, are antidepressants called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, otherwise known as SSRIs. And what they do is they prevent reuptake of serotonin from happening. So I need to briefly explain what happens. Serotonin is fired from one neuron to the next. It's fired across something called a synaptic gap, and synaptic transmission occurs. The neurotransmitter, that is serotonin, passes a message to the receiving serotonin. Once that is done and the message is given, the serotonin then goes back to the original neuron from which it came. Now, what SSRIs do, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, is they mimic serotonin. It's not serotonin, as say we cannot synthetically recreate it, but they'll mimic it, and they will block the receptor so that it is unable, so reuptake is not able to happen. So the message has been given, and then the serotonin, the neurotransmitter, wants to go back, but it can't. It's stopped. It's stopped by, you got it, the antidepressant. And so therefore it remains in the synaptic gap. And you have therefore a build-up of serotonin, and this is a good thing with patients that otherwise would have a lack of serotonin, or so we think, because this is the possible cause of their depression. A build-up of serotonin in the synaptic gap will ultimately lead to an artificially inflated mood, again, which is a good thing. And it's therefore carefully managed. The antidepressants are carefully managed to ensure that a patient can continuously feel a sense of being able to have a good self-esteem and feel motivated and be able to sleep, because of course they've got a regular level of serotonin in their body, as opposed to a depleted number. However, like with many drugs, there are of course side effects which we need to observe really carefully. Some are no bother really whatsoever, and if I can get to it, we have, for example, things like we have weight gain being one potential side effect. We have insomnia and have a dry mouth. These are not massive issues. We then go to more extreme, serious side effects. A person might become aggressive or have suicidal thoughts, which clearly we need to be aware of. Now, the other way of managing depression is through cognitive behavior therapy, and this very much is regarded as the gold standard in the 21st century. Cognitive therapy, and the idea is Cognitive therapy is based on the cognitive theory and the idea that our thought processes after our behavior and that behavior and emotion are influenced by our thinking. CBT is a talking therapy that helps people to change their thinking patterns, like negative schemas. So I don't feel I've made that very clear. So you would visit a therapist, and you will have quite clearly deep cutting feelings about certain events in your life, and your interpretation of those events will be things that the therapist would challenge if you have extremely negative schemas about it. So, for example, if you had very negative schemas about a parental divorce, now you don't own that. That's not your action that has caused that, but you might actually feel that to be the case. And so your feelings are significant. The therapist will look at squashing those particular feelings that you have and bashing, if metaphorically speaking, bashing those negative schemas down. And so that actually you are not going to be ever feeling positive about it, but at least the complete negative feeling that is actually impeding your mental health will be reduced. There are two perspectives to dealing with mental health problems and depression. There is a reductionist approach. Now, a reductionist approach says that the best way to understand complex things like human behavior is to study the most fundamental and basic part of it. The biological explanation of mental health problems like depression can be considered to be reductionist. So they have reduced the cause of what they believe the depression to be, the cause of the depression, and they are absolutely pinpointing it. So therefore they might, for example, prescribe drugs, and that would therefore address the cause. So it's about pinpointing the actual cause, whereas holistic, it might be, for example, that they look at the person as a whole, and they might, for example, say, well, you need to go on such and such a diet, do such and such an activity, take this medication. So it involves a whole blend of things, from medication to therapy to changing lifestyle to increase levels of exercise. This, without doubt, has been successful in the past in improving patient mood. However, we do not necessarily know what variable is responsible for actually the upturn in mood, whereas reductionist is obviously more risky because we might be wrong in our diagnosis in terms of what is causing the depression. But if we absolutely hit the nail on the head, we therefore have tackled the cause, and so the benefits are obviously greater.